Welcome to another episode of Mexican in the Kitchen. This recipe, just as many others I've done, requires for some boiled chicken and some chicken broth. So I'm going to do this really quick on a pressure pot. If you don't have one, don't worry, because you can do the exact same thing on the stove with a normal pot. I have 800 grams of chicken. You can use whatever you want. I chose drumsticks because this is the only part I found on my local store with some skin. I want the skin because it gives a lot of flavor to the broth, and I'm going to use the broth, so I need that. You can also use thighs or chicken breast if you want. I added an onion cut in half, some fresh coriander, and some salt. In this case, I'm using the salt that has a bit of the vegetable kind of mix. If you don't have a salt like that, you can use normal salt, it doesn't matter. I prefer that because it gives a bit of an extra taste. I'm setting my pot for 13 minutes. If you are cooking on a pressure pot that goes on the stove, you have to count those after the pressure has built. If you are cooking on a normal pot on the stove, then you have to boil for 40 minutes. Once our chicken is ready, the broth should have quite nice color, quite nice smell. Our chicken should be quite tender, and at this point, this is perfect. We're going to set it apart and we'll use this later. If you have seen the video where I make a peanut sauce with tomato, then this is kind of familiar for you. I'm going to start by using pumpkin seed because that's what's gonna give the texture and a bit of the taste to our sauce. Just like with the peanuts and other seeds I've used, we don't want this skillet to be too hot. I have it on a 3 out of 6 on the stove. We want to toast them to highlight the flavor, but we don't want them to burn because they might become bitter. So as soon as you see that they start changing color, then your seeds are going to be ready and we can take them off the fire. As you can see, my seeds have this golden toasted color, really nice. They start smelling a bit, and also they're a bit crispy if you try them. So at this point I'm going to set them aside. Now I'm using some sesame seeds. At the end I adjusted the recipe a bit, so I used 150 grams of pumpkin seed and about 40-50 grams of sesame seeds. Sesame seeds can burn quite quickly. You will notice the color starts changing quite fast, so just keep moving them around, and as soon as they start changing color, take them off the fire, set them aside. Usually this recipe will need some fresh tomatillos, but it's rare to find them here where I live. Luckily we have this pirca salsa verde. This is really nice because it's actually made in Mexico. It's exactly the same thing they sell there, and while I think you can use this in tacos and stuff like that, for me it's a bit too acid, so I always use it for cooking more than for using it as a sauce. I am using 2 jars, so it's around 460 grams of the sauce. I'm going to throw everything into my blender, and I'm going to use a bit of the chicken soup to just wash a bit of my jars and make sure you take all of that sauce. Later we will add some more chicken broth, so don't worry about the amount you use, especially if your blender is not the best, just as mine. The more liquid you add there, the easier it will be for it to blend everything. I will also add 1 small onion and a handful of fresh coriander. Finally, I will add the 50 grams of sesame seed and the 150 grams of pumpkin seed. Depending on the texture you like, you can add more or add a bit less of the seeds, but that's completely up to you. As I said earlier, I'm adding a bit more chicken broth just so everything blends easier, and I'm adding some salt. This salt has a bit of vegetables in there, but you can also use regular salt. Depending on your blender, this might take a while or not, but just make sure you keep blending for a bit longer than you think it needs, just to make sure the texture is nice, creamy, and it's a bit more even, you don't have big chunks. This is how my sauce looks after a while, so I'm going to take this to the pan. This pan is on a 3 or 4 out of 6. I don't want it to be too hot because I don't want the sauce to just start boiling that much and just jumping all around. So I'm going to add the sauce in here, and then I'm adding also a bit of chicken broth. I'll use it to rinse a bit my blender, take everything that was in the bottom there. At this point, all we have to do is just mix everything, keep stirring from time to time, make sure it doesn't get stuck to the bottom, but just cook it for between 10 and 15 minutes. If you think it's a bit too liquid, you just keep reducing until it has the texture you want. This is also the perfect time to taste and make sure the salt is right. If not, then you can add a bit more and adjust. But for me, this is the right texture. You can also reduce it a bit more if you want, but I think this is ready to serve. This sauce has so much flavor, it's really nice. You only need some chicken on a plate, cover it with the sauce, and that's it. But of course you can serve it with some rice, some white rice, and have the sauce mixed with that rice. It goes really well together, gives a perfect combination. This is how I do Pipian Verde. Of course, the simplified version of it. The original recipe has way more ingredients. It has a lot of more things that Especially now that I live in Finland, they're a bit harder to find, and they're also a bit hard to find fresh. Because for example, I could have tomatillos, those are the base for it, but it's hard to find them here fresh. You can get them in a can, it's not quite the same. They have a bit of an acidity that you will be able to taste here as well. But I think when you add the coriander, the onion, that kind of fixes a bit that kind of acidity. It makes it a bit nicer, gives a lot more flavor. The fact that you use the chicken broth is also quite nice. If you don't have the chicken broth, you can use a cube. Adding the pumpkin seed is what makes the texture, what makes a bit of the flavor. The sesame seed is a really nice dish. If you are living like me, somewhere that you cannot get these ingredients, or if you just want to make something simple, something quick for the week, because the real thing is something I would do on a weekend when I have way more time. But this simplified version is something really quick, really nice. I really like the result. I hope you try it at home. I hope you like the video. Press like, subscribe, share it with your friends, all those kind of things. Activate the bell, and see you in the next one.